The massive crystalline structure hummed quietly in the center of the Galactic Cartographic Union headquarters. Inside its glowing walls, millions of star charts floated like tiny lights, each one representing a mapped system in the known galaxy. For over 3,000 years, the Union had sent ships to every corner of space, cataloging planets, stars, and resources with perfect precision. Senior cartographer Veltara moved her 6 arms across the control panel, her purple skin reflecting the soft blue glow of the data streams. As the head of the mapping division, she took pride in their work. The galaxy was 99.7% mapped. Only a few dozen systems remained unexplored, and most of those were just empty space or dead stars. But one entry always bothered her: South-3, a small yellow star system in the outer rim. The file glowed red with warning markers: quarantined navigation hazard, no survey authorized, danger level, extreme. For 200 years, that red mark had sat in their database like an infected wound. Every other senior cartographer had ignored it, passing the problem to the next generation. But Veltara was different. She hated incomplete work. "Ma'am." A young voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Kix standing behind her. The junior cartographer was barely 30 cycles old, his crystalline features still sharp and unmarked by age. His species, the Valkyrie, were known for their curiosity and stubbornness. Both traits made them excellent explorers. "What do you want, Kix?" Veltara asked, though she already suspected the answer. "I've been studying the Sol-3 files," he said, his voice excited. "The energy readings don't make sense. Look at this." It activated a small projector, and holographic data filled the air between them. Energy signatures, gravitational readings, and electromagnetic patterns swirled in complex patterns. "These readings were taken by the last probe we sent 200 years ago," Kix explained. "The energy output from that system is impossible. It's like they have multiple stars, but the spectral analysis shows only one." Veltara studied the data with growing unease. She had seen these readings before, but never examined them closely. The numbers were indeed strange. Too much energy, too many artificial-looking patterns, too many things that didn't fit standard stellar physics. 17 ships have been sent to investigate, she reminded him. None returned, not even a distress signal. "But that's exactly why we need to go back," Kix insisted. "What if they found something amazing? What if they're still alive, but can't communicate? We're cartographers. It's our job to map the unknown." Veltara looked around the vast chamber. Other cartographers worked quietly at their stations, updating charts, processing new data, cataloging the endless details of galactic civilization. Peaceful, routine work. Safe work. The Sol-3 file pulsed red in the corner of her vision. "The Council will never approve another mission," she said. "Too many losses, too much risk." "They will if you recommend it," Kix replied. "You're the senior cartographer. Your word carries weight." That was true, but it was also dangerous. Veltara had built her career on successful missions and accurate data. Recommending a survey of Sol-3 could destroy her reputation if things went wrong. And given the history, things would probably go very wrong. But the incomplete database bothered her more than the risk to her career. "Why do you want to go?" she asked Kix directly. The young cartographer's eyes gleamed with ambition and curiosity. "Because it's the biggest mystery in the galaxy. Because 17 ships vanished, and we don't know why. Because that red mark on our perfect database drives me crazy every time I see it." Veltara almost smiled. She remembered feeling that way once, before age and responsibility had taught her caution. "The Council meets tomorrow," she said finally. "If I recommend this mission, you'll be the one going. Are you prepared for that?" Kix straightened, trying to look confident. "Yes, ma'am, absolutely." But Veltara noticed his hands shaking slightly. Good. A little fear would keep him alive longer. That night, she reviewed the Sol 3 files one more time. 17 expeditions. The first few had been large military vessels, assuming they might face hostile aliens. Later missions used smaller, faster ships, designed to gather data and escape quickly. The most recent attempt had been a single pilot, reconnaissance craft equipped with the best sensors the Union could build. All had the same result. The ships would enter the Sol system, transmit initial readings showing impossible energy signatures, and then, silence, no battles, no explosions, no final messages, just silence. What could cause that? What could make entire crews simply disappear without a trace? Veltara closed the files and made her decision. Tomorrow, she would recommend the mission to the Council, and she would watch another young cartographer fly into the unknown, probably never to return. But maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe this time, they would finally learn what lay hidden in that mysterious yellow star system. Maybe the red mark could finally be removed from their perfect database, or maybe she was just sending another idealistic young explorer to his death. The crystalline walls hummed softly around her, holding the knowledge of a million worlds, all except one. Kix's small survey ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and immediately every alarm on his control panel began screaming. Red lights flashed across his crystalline face as impossible readings flooded his instruments. The energy signatures were beyond anything in the galactic database. His six-fingered hands danced across the controls, trying to make sense of the data. The third planet from the star showed massive electromagnetic activity. Artificial gravity. Wells that shouldn't exist. Fusion reactions that looked like miniature stars scattered throughout the system. And ships. Hundreds of ships moving in perfect formation around the planets. This is impossible, Kix whispered to himself. According to Union records, this system contained primitive life forms that had barely discovered fire. The latest intelligence reports were only 200 years old, practically yesterday in galactic terms. Before he could process more data, his proximity alarms activated. 3 sleek vessels materialized around his ship as if they had been invisible moments before. Their hulls were dark gray, almost black, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with fluid grace that made his own ship feel clumsy and outdated. Unknown vessel. This is Commander Lee of Earth Defense Force. A voice crackled through his communications system. The translator struggled with the alien language, producing choppy, mechanical words. Please prepare for escort to Station Alpha. Do not deviate from assigned course. Any hostile action will result in immediate response. Kix's throat pouch inflated with nervous energy. Earth Defense Force. These were the primitive beings from the third planet. His claws clicked against the control panel as he activated his response transmitter. This is Survey Ship Kix of N7 of the Galactic Cartographic Union, he replied carefully. I am conducting a routine stellar survey under Union authority. I mean no harm. There was a long pause. Then the voice returned, and Kix could hear what might have been laughter in the background. Routine survey, right? Follow the lead ship, please. Someone wants to talk with you. The escort ships moved into formation around him, their engines producing no visible exhaust or energy signature he could detect. Whatever propulsion system they used was completely unknown to galactic science. As they traveled deeper into the system, Kix's instruments registered more impossible things. Massive orbital structures around the fourth planet. Industrial complexes in the asteroid belt that dwarfed anything the Union had ever built. And everywhere, more ships. Station Alpha hung in space, like a small moon, its surface covered with docking bays, weapon arrays, and sensor equipment that made Kix's survey ship look like a child's toy. As his escort guided him toward a docking bay, he noticed other ships in the station's bays. Some looked familiar, too familiar. One of them was clearly a Union vessel, though its hull markings had been painted over. The docking bay sealed around his ship with a soft hiss, and artificial gravity took hold. Kix checked his environment suit twice before opening the airlock. The atmosphere read as safe for his species, but he didn't trust readings anymore. Nothing here made sense. Commander Lee was waiting for him in the docking bay, flanked by two guards in strange black uniforms. She was smaller than Kix expected, with short dark hair and brown eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. Her species was clearly mammalian, bipedal, with pale skin and soft features. She looked harmless, but the weapon on her belt hummed with contained energy that made Kix's scales tingle with fear. "Welcome to the Sol System," Commander Lee said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Your charts are somewhat out of date." She gestured for him to follow, and Kix found himself walking through corridors that defied everything he knew about space station construction. The walls seemed to be made from a single piece of material, with no joints or seams. Gravity remained constant, despite the station's obvious rotation, and the technology integrated into every surface was generations beyond anything the Union possessed. "How long?" Kix asked as they walked. "How long, what?" Commander Lee replied. "How long have your people possessed this technology?" "The Union's last intelligence report said your species was pre-space flight." Commander Lee stopped walking and turned to face him. For a moment, her diplomatic mask slipped, and Kix saw something that made his blood freeze. Not cruelty or anger, but a kind of patient confidence that suggested she held all the cards in whatever game they were playing. "The last Union intelligence report was 200 years ago," she said quietly. "A lot can change in 2 centuries. They continued walking until they reached an observation deck. Through the transparent walls, Kix could see the third planet, Earth, hanging in space below them. But it wasn't the primitive world his files described. Orbital rings surrounded it, like jeweled necklaces. Massive structures extended from the surface into space. The night side glowed with artificial lights, in patterns too complex and organized to be natural. "My government would like to discuss a few things with you," Commander Lee said, her diplomatic smile returning. "I hope you're not in a hurry to get back to your people." Kix stared at the transformed world below and realized that 17 Union ships hadn't vanished mysteriously. They had found something the Union wasn't prepared to understand, and now he was about to learn what that something was. 3 hours later, Kix stood in the observation lounge of Station Alpha, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Through the massive windows, Earth rotated slowly below them, but this wasn't the primitive world from his database. Enormous ring structures circled the planet like silver jewelry. Space elevators stretched from the surface into orbit, carrying streams of cargo containers. The night side blazed with city lights, arranged in perfect geometric patterns. "Impressive, isn't it?" Commander Lee joined him at the window, carrying 2 cups of steaming liquid. She offered one to Kix. "It's called coffee, completely safe for your species." Kix accepted the cup with trembling claws. The warm liquid had a bitter but pleasant taste that helped calm his nerves slightly. "This is impossible. 200 years ago, your people were using primitive combustion engines, stone and metal tools. The Union classified you as Level 2 civilization." "Level 2, Lee repeated, sounding amused. "What level are we now?" Kix looked at the transformed planet below, then at the space station around them. The technology he could see was easily level 8 or 9. Some of it looked like level 10, which was supposed to be theoretical. "I don't know," he admitted. "The scale doesn't go high enough." Lee nodded as if she had expected that answer. "Would you like a tour? I think seeing is better than explaining." They took a transport shuttle to the planet's surface, and Kix's amazement grew with every passing minute. The cities were clean and efficient, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground rather than being constructed. Parks and green spaces were everywhere, but they weren't random. Everything was planned, organized, optimized. Population? Kix asked, as they flew over a metropolis that stretched to the horizon. About 12 billion on Earth, Lee replied casually. Another 8 billion in the colonies. Colonies. Lee pointed through the shuttle window toward a red dot in the sky. Mars has been fully terraformed for 60 years now. We have cities on Europa, mining stations throughout the asteroid belt, research facilities on the outer planets. Humans live comfortably in every environment in this system. They landed at what Lee called a university, though it looked more like a small city. Students of various ages walked between buildings, many carrying devices that projected three-dimensional images into the air. Kix watched a group of children, who couldn't be more than 10 years old, working with holographic models of atomic structures. Your educational system, Kix observed, it's very advanced. Every human learns basic physics, chemistry, biology, and mathematics by age 12, Lee explained, as they walked through the campus. By 16, they choose their specialization. By 20, they're contributing to research projects. They stopped at a research building where human scientists were working on projects that made Kix's head spin. In one laboratory, researchers manipulated individual atoms to build materials that shouldn't exist. In another, they tested engines that could fold space-time. A third group was working on something Lee called consciousness transfer technology. How? Kix asked, his voice barely a whisper. The Union has existed for thousands of years. We've had interstellar flight for 3 millennia. How did you advance so quickly? Lee was quiet for a moment, then led him to a private office overlooking the campus. She activated a holographic display that showed the history of human technological development. The timeline made Kix's scales stand on end. First powered flight, 1903. First satellite, 1957. First moon landing, 1969. First fusion reactor, 2031. First faster-than-light drive, 2089. First terraformed planet, 2156. The numbers blurred together. 250 years from first flight to interstellar colonization. The Union's member species had taken tens of thousands of years to achieve the same progress. We don't just solve problems, Lee continued. We solve the systems that create problems. We don't just adapt to environments, we redesign them. We don't just use resources, we transform them into tools that help us transform even more resources. She showed him data streams from human colonies throughout the system. Mars wasn't just terraformed, it was improved. The atmosphere was cleaner than Earth's had ever been naturally. Europa's oceans teemed with engineered life forms that produced useful materials. The asteroid belt was being systematically converted into raw materials for even larger construction projects. What are you building? Kix asked. The next phase, Lee replied. Humans don't think in terms of working within existing systems. We think in terms of building better systems. And the Union ships. The 17 expeditions that never returned. Lee's expression became more serious. They weren't destroyed, Kix. Their crews are still here, working with us. They faced the same choice you're about to face, which is whether to go back and report what you've seen, or stay and help us prepare for what comes next. Kix looked out at the bustling campus below, where human students and researchers worked on projects that could revolutionize galactic civilization overnight. Then he thought about the Union, with its slow councils and careful procedures and thousands of years of gradual progress. What comes next? He asked. Lee's smile was both gentle and terrifying. Contact, but not the kind your people are expecting. We're not going to ask to join the Galactic Union, Kix. We're going to offer them something much better. The truth hit him like a physical blow. The quarantine wasn't protecting the galaxy from primitive humans. It was protecting the galaxy's entire political and technological structure from a species that could make it all obsolete in a single generation. The next morning, Kix found himself in a meeting room that overlooked Earth's primary shipyard. Through the transparent walls, he watched construction crews building vessels that dwarfed anything in the Union fleet. The ships were sleek and beautiful, but their weapon arrays and engine systems suggested power that could crack planets. Admiral Park entered the room quietly. He was an older human with gray hair and kind eyes, but Kix could sense the authority that surrounded him like invisible armor. Behind him walked Captain Kim, a younger woman whose sharp gaze seemed to catalog every detail of Kix's appearance and behavior. "Please, sit," Admiral Park said, gesturing to a chair designed for Kix's species. The humans had clearly prepared for this meeting. 17 ships, the Admiral began without preamble. 17 crews from different Union species. All faced the same decision you're about to face. He activated a holographic display, and Kix saw images of the missing survey crews. They were alive, working alongside humans in various roles throughout the system. A Velkari scientist like himself worked in a genetics laboratory on Mars. A Zephyrian pilot helped test new spacecraft designs. A Chromel engineer assisted with terraforming projects on Europa. They all chose to stay, Kix asked. "Not all," Captain Kim replied. 3 crews chose to return to Union space. They carried fabricated sensor logs showing Sol system as empty space too dangerous for exploration. Their reports kept the quarantine in place. Admiral Park nodded. "We needed time to prepare. Time to develop our technology. Time to plan for eventual contact on our terms." And the crews who stayed, they became advisors, Park explained. Their knowledge of Union politics, technology, and culture has been invaluable. In return, they've helped us understand how different species think and work together. Kix studied the images more carefully. The alien crew members looked healthy and engaged in their work. Some worked alone, others led mixed teams of humans and aliens. None appeared to be prisoners or slaves. "Why?" Kix asked. "Why give us a choice at all? With your technology, you could simply capture our ships." Captain Kim and Admiral Park exchanged a glance that spoke of long discussions on this topic. "Because conquest creates resistance," Kim said. "We don't want to rule through fear or force. When humanity emerges from isolation, we want our new civilization to be built on willing cooperation." Park leaned forward in his chair. "Kix, what would happen if you returned to Union space with accurate reports of what you've seen here?" Kix thought about it carefully. "Panic. The Council would assume humanity poses an existential threat to galactic civilization. They would probably try to organize a military response, and they would lose," Kix admitted. "Badly. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. A war would devastate the Union." "Exactly. So we offer a choice instead. Stay and help us. Prepare for peaceful contact, or return with false data that maintains the status quo until we're ready." Through the window, Kix watched human workers loading cargo containers onto one of the massive ships. The efficiency was mesmerizing. Teams of humans and robots worked together with perfect coordination, completing tasks in minutes that would take Union crews hours. "What happens when you decide you're ready?" Kix asked. Admiral Park activated another display, this one showing star charts with marked human exploration routes. Phase 1 begins in approximately 5 years. Small fleets will appear at the edges of Union space, not as invaders, but as problem solvers. Problem solvers. Captain Kim took over the explanation. The Union faces several chronic issues: food shortages on overcrowded worlds, resource depletion, technological stagnation, environmental collapse on industrial planets. We can solve these problems quickly and efficiently, in exchange for what? Administrative oversight, Park said simply. Humans are very good at organization and long-term planning. We would help Union worlds optimize their societies the same way we've optimized ours. Kix felt a chill run down his spine. The humans weren't planning conquest in the traditional sense. They were planning to make themselves indispensable. Once Union worlds experienced human efficiency and technology, they would never want to go back to the old ways. And if we refuse your help, then you remain free to continue as you are, Kim said. But your neighbors who accept our assistance will prosper while you struggle with the same old problems. Economic and social pressure will eventually convince most holdouts. It was brilliant and terrifying. The humans would remake galactic civilization not through force, but by offering something so much better that resistance would become impossible. The test, Kix said, understanding finally. It's not about loyalty or secrecy. No, Admiral Park confirmed. It's about whether you can psychologically handle the paradigm shift. Some beings cannot accept that their entire civilization is about to be superseded. They would rather die fighting than live in a human-led galaxy. And those who can accept it become part of something greater than they ever imagined possible. Kix looked at the holographic images of the alien crew members working alongside humans. They didn't look defeated or resigned. They looked excited, engaged, purposeful. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Take all the time you need, Park replied. But remember, once you choose, there's no changing your mind. The future of both our civilizations may depend on decisions like yours. Outside, the massive human ships continued their preparations, ready to reshape the galaxy, whether the Union was prepared or not. Kix stood alone in his quarters aboard Station Alpha, staring at 2 data chips on his desk. One contained the real sensor data from his survey of the Sol system, energy readings that would prove human technological supremacy. Population counts. That would shock the Union. Evidence of a civilization that had advanced centuries and mere decades. The other chip contained carefully fabricated data. False readings showing Sol 3 as a gravitational anomaly zone. Dangerous radiation signatures. Atmospheric conditions that would kill most known life forms. Everything needed to maintain the quarantine for another generation. Admiral Park had given him 3 days to decide. Now, on the final morning, Kix picked up the false data chip and sealed it in his ship's primary storage unit. The real data went into a hidden compartment that would only open with his personal biosignature. Commander Lee escorted him to the docking bay where his survey ship waited. Other humans worked quietly around them, checking his ship's systems and loading supplies for his journey home. Any regrets? Lee asked as they reached his airlock. Kix looked back at the massive station, thinking of the alien crew members who had chosen to stay. Part of him envied their courage to embrace such a radical change, but another part knew he wasn't ready for that leap. Not regrets, he said carefully, but I wonder what I'm missing. You're buying your people time, Lee replied. Time to prepare for what's coming. That has value too. 6 months later, Kix sat in the Galactic Council chambers, delivering his false report. The assembled representatives from dozens of species listened with visible relief as he described Sol 3 as a dangerous dead zone. Several council members nodded approvingly when he recommended extending the quarantine indefinitely. Excellent work, Cartographer Kix, Senior Veltara said when he finished. Another mystery solved, another hazard properly documented, but hidden. In Kix's personal files were encrypted messages from Admiral Park, contact protocols, technology transfer schedules, diplomatic frameworks for a first contact that would change everything. Kix found himself checking these files obsessively, watching for signs that Phase 1 had begun. The first human ships appeared exactly when Park had promised they would. They materialized at the edge of Union space, not in threatening formations, but in small exploration groups. The crews identified themselves politely to local authorities and requested permission to offer assistance with local problems. The response was exactly what Admiral Park had predicted. Some worlds refused contact entirely. Others allowed limited interaction Out of curiosity, a few desperate colonies, struggling with famine or environmental collapse, welcomed human help with open arms. Within weeks, the results were undeniable. Human agricultural technology turned barren worlds into garden paradises. Their medical advances cured diseases that had plagued species for millennia. Their engineering solutions cleaned polluted atmospheres and restored damaged ecosystems. Captain Han stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship diplomatic vessel, watching alien delegations board for the first official contact conference. She wore a simple uniform that bore no military decorations, but her crew moved with the quiet confidence of people who held overwhelming technological advantages. Status report, she requested from her aide, Lieutenant Jin, 43 star. Systems have formally requested human administrative oversight, Jin reported. 17 others have signed technology sharing agreements. The Galactic Council has called an emergency session to address what they're calling the human phenomenon. Han nodded. When faced with humanity's capabilities, most rational beings chose cooperation over competition. The few species that tried to resist found themselves increasingly isolated as their neighbors embraced human solutions to age-old problems. And the survey ship that started all this, Cartographer Kix, has been promoted to Senior Advisor on Human Relations. Jin replied with slight amusement. He's become quite the expert on our capabilities. On his homeworld, Kix watched through his office window as human transport ships landed at the spaceport. They brought miraculous medical equipment, environmental restoration systems, and educational technologies that would transform his people's lives within a generation. Children who had been dying from genetic diseases were now healthy. Polluted cities were becoming clean and beautiful. His own people had voted overwhelmingly to accept human guidance after seeing what humanity offered their neighbors. The choice had been easy once they understood the alternatives. Join the new human-led civilization, or watch from the sidelines as everyone else prospered. The Galactic Union still existed, but it served a very different purpose now. Instead of a confederation of equals struggling with common problems, it had become an administrative body that helped coordinate humanity's improvement projects across thousands of worlds. Commander Lee, now Ambassador Lee, stood before the reformed Galactic Council in their new headquarters on Earth. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber, but the real power clearly rested with the humans who managed the various improvement initiatives. The quarterly reports show continued progress across all sectors, she announced to the assembly. Agricultural output is up 30%. Life expectancy has increased on every member world. Crime rates have dropped to historic lows. Environmental restoration projects are ahead of schedule. The alien representatives applauded politely, but Kix noticed they looked to the human administrators for guidance, even in their enthusiasm. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy through force or deception. They had simply made themselves so useful, so efficient, so obviously superior at solving problems, that resistance had become pointless. No one charted beyond Earth anymore, because Earth had become the center from which all galactic civilization flowed. The red mark in the cartographic database had been replaced with a golden symbol indicating the seat of galactic government. Humanity hadn't joined the galaxy. They had rebuilt it entirely.